Wolfman marks director Lee Whannell's second venture into the classic Universal monster movie lineup, with his previous modern reimagined The Invisible Man releasing to praise from both critics and audiences alike. The movie was a phenomenal look at how trauma can affect and damage us, leaving a residual effect, all while telling a compelling modernised rendition of a story first adapted from a book published all the way back in 1897. But I am not here to praise that movie, that will no doubt come another day. So when talking about this Wolfman movie, I do want to try and view it as independently as I possibly can, but it's going to be difficult to not draw at least some comparisons between this and Whannell's other monster project. Because conceptually these things both exist to offer a modern take on a classic horror icon, and while neither is necessarily bad, in fact I enjoy both of them, it is clear to me standing here now that there is one that is far better than the other. Spoilers are going to be ahead because unlike Blumhouse, I do actually care about you people going into something spoiler free, and with that disclaimer out of the way, here's my few words on Wolfman. So there's an underlying sense of disappointment that I feel with Wolfman, and that this is a pretty good movie. It's a decent attempt to ground this character, but it could have been so much better. Because I do prefer talking about the positive side of film, I will be starting off with what worked for me in this movie, then we'll go back and forth depending on how the script flows, because I do want it to be as fluid as possible, especially considering that this is a more generalised review when compared to my normal format. Just a heads up that this is also a lot less structured than usual. I'm not working with a script so much as I have bullet points to the side that I'd like to go over. This might not work, we're going to trial it over the next few attempts, so just bear with me while we work it out. First off, this thing is atmospheric as hell, and that works so well in its favour. The setting of the secluded forest with our main characters isolated from society is executed and portrayed with so much unease. There's so many sprawling overhead shots of forestry early on that really give you a scope for how isolated this place is. The cinematography for a large portion of this movie is stellar, and while I think there's elements of it that don't necessarily work for the whole film, there's moments across it as a whole, especially in the first half, that make me think it's worth bringing up as a positive. And as the night comes, the atmosphere continues to deepen, engaging this really eerie feeling of tension. I could compare this to the way that Whannell handles tension in The Invisible Man, because it's clear from the two that it's the same vision behind both. The camera works with the setting, slowly working its way into corners, leering into the pitch darkness, and creating this undeniably stressful atmosphere that is probably the second strongest aspect of this entire movie. I have to hand it to Whannell and cinematographer Stefan Duccio, I apologise if I butchered that name, because once again, not all of it works. I will get to those negatives, but for the first half of this movie at least, these aspects are stellar and very rarely take a wrong turn. I also really adored the sound design here. There is this scene where Blake is going through the house and we follow along with him as he's searching for this strange sound, only to learn that it's coming from a spider and we're hearing it through his heightened senses. I think the film does such a great job at portraying that. This and the use of the other perspective changes where we're getting to see Blake's transformation from within his own head, I thought that was really neat and I really wish the film did some more with it. Until now, I've never seen a movie starring Julia Garner. This is the first project that I've seen her in. I am aware of what's coming up. I'm aware of her future as Shalabal in the MCU, or the Silver Surfer for those of you who can't Google names. I am also aware of Apartment 7A, which released last year, that I do keep wanting to watch but just never get around to. However, as far as advertisements for an actor's filmography goes, this thing works, and I'd be really intrigued to watch more of her stuff after seeing this, because she is probably Wolfman's strongest element. Consistently, she's at a high here. There's definitely other aspects which peak higher, but those aspects also plummet significantly as the film develops. Garner's performance as Charlotte is fantastic from start to finish, with this complex performance filled with the emotional detachment that her character faces for a large portion of the runtime. The script really isn't all that great here, and I couldn't have faulted Garner if she'd put in a below par performance, because that's really the best that this thing offers. But above that, she's able to elevate herself above the mediocre writing, and as a result that really enhances this film a lot for me. I also think in that Garner lends herself to another aspect of this movie that I think is a positive. And that's in the way that the film's able to do quite a lot with what's a pretty bare bones script. It's a very basic concept. I just mentioned it, but the script does genuinely leave a lot to be desired, but the actors are able to do enough with it to stretch this thing out to just about make it work. However, what ends up happening is because these do paper over the cracks, they begin to be stretched a little too thin, and that's when the veil really starts to fall on the problems with this thing. The second half of the movie suffers really badly from a lot of baggage that's first acknowledged in the opening scene. One thing in particular that I really wasn't on board with was the way that they handled the generational trauma in this movie. It so clearly feels like they're trying to emulate how the Invisible Man tackled its interpretation of trauma while honing it to a different factor, but it doesn't work here. The wolfman that's been stalking the family for the movie being revealed as Blake's father was just so cheap, and I saw it coming a mile away. I felt a little disappointed when I saw that this was how they were going to wrap the narrative up, because it just felt like such a cop-out. Speaking of Blake, I am going to be hesitant in saying this because once again, like my issues with the script, the writing could have played a massive part in why I feel this way about his performance, but I really wasn't convinced here. I don't want to say he was miscast, but it's the only way I can actually describe it. He just doesn't really seem like he fits in with the rest of the movie, and that would usually result in me saying that his performance feels disjointed from the rest of the characters, but that's not the case. In fact, there's probably only one actor that he has zero chemistry here, and that's Julia Garner, because she's the only good one in the movie. I'm not going to harp on the kid for too long. I know that it's more well known at this point that kid actors in movies tend to be very inconsistent across the board, but it is sometimes painful how much Garner has to carry the acting side of this on her back. Everyone else feels like they're reading from cue cards, but Julia Garner really feels like she's acting, you know? I don't really know how else to explain it, and look, I know there's going to be someone that claims it's just because I've got a movie crush, but I swear it's based on acting ability this time. It's terribly lit, which sometimes does work in its favour, and by sometimes I mean that it works for a scene in the final 10 minutes. I get that consistency needs to be a thing, but I would personally value being able to actually see the previous 45 minutes over being obscured for the sake of a cool shot that lasts 30 seconds, if not less. It might sound like I'm overreacting with that point, but the exposure in this film is at an all-time low for so long, and it is insufferable to sit through. Again, I understand the concept between grounding an audience in a situation, but there is a difference between doing this and making it seem as though you've got into contact with the production team of Aliens vs Predator Requiem looking for lighting advice. I do like the body horror on display though. This is another pretty positive aspect of it. I think the effects are pretty solid, and while I'm not fully on board with the final design of the Wolfman, I think it could have used a tad more fur, but conceptually I think it's fine. I am more than okay, especially when knowing that it's practical. I would have preferred to see it for the first time in the film, but you know, Blumhouse had to go ahead and release the full transformation a full week early online, because why wouldn't you? This is just a small footnote. I'm not going to spend too long on it, because if I did I'd be here all day, but it genuinely baffles me how bad Blumhouse are at promoting their content. Either really badly misdirect you to the point where it feels like a completely different film in a bad way, or they go ahead and reveal absolutely everything in the marketing, and you would think for the production company that seems to be leading the horror distribution market right now, they would have the formula marked out by now. Overall, I think it's pretty clear that I don't love Wolfman, but I'm not fully against it either. Reality is, I would watch this again. I'd have the exposure maxed out on my TV, but I'd definitely watch it. It does have some charm and showcases some of that competency that was present in Winnell's previous film, and I genuinely appreciate that. Problems aside, it's a flawed yet enjoyable film that I would definitely tell you to watch for yourself, rather than gauging your opinion off of what some loser online is saying. Wait a minute. But that is when I turn the metaphorical microphone over to you. I would like to know your thoughts on Wolfman in the comments below if you've seen it, well as recommending your favourite werewolf related content in the comments below, because it's a side of the genre that I've never really got into until now, and I'd like to explore it a little. Also, please leave your thoughts on the video as a whole. I do want to experiment with these shorter videos talking about the new films that come out, that will come in between videos. They're not going to be replacing the main ones, because I am aware that there is significantly less quality here because I'm having to compensate for the fact that there's not a whole lot of footage I can use. I'm going to trial this again in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully after seeing Nosferatu, so in that time I'll hopefully have an idea of how to work out some of the issues that this has. So please also leave a comment below, let me know if there's anything that you'd like to see me change with this. But that's everything from me, so leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one, and until then, I've been Media13.